Training camp starts today for your Carolina Panthers. What are some of the top storylines, position battles, and what is the injury report looking like heading into camp? We'll talk about that right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council. Why? Because on Friday, it is back, the weekly Friday mailbag, either at me or DM me. But of course, follow me on Twitter at Julian Council to get those questions in for this week's edition of the weekly Friday mailbag here on Locked On Panthers. Today's episode of Locked On Panthers is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As the playoffs are over and the NFL season isn't quite here, the sports stop sporting like we want them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started today. All righty. We have made it. Training camp is going to begin today, but really practice begins tomorrow. So that's when it begins. But either way, Tuesday, we're here. All the vets are reporting to camp on Friday. The rookies reported. The vets report today. Then the first practice starting at 9:30 a.m. Eastern time here in Uptown Charlotte on Wednesday. They'll practice again on Thursday. Then Saturday, hope you guys get out there. I think a lot of these training camp practices are sold out. That's the unfortunate thing about being here in Charlotte and not down at Wofford. But back together Saturday, happening on Saturday. So hopefully, if there's still tickets available, y'all can go check out the Panthers throughout training camp here in Charlotte. And then, of course, Fan Fest down there at Clemson on August 1st. But on today's show, let's have our comprehensive training camp preview, looking at the top storylines, camp battles, and injury report heading into camp. Some big injury updates that we got on Friday. Thought we might hear more about them on today, Tuesday. But I guess we will hear from Dave Canales and probably Dan Morgan, a couple of the players also on Tuesday. So just wait on that. But here we go. Let's talk about the top storylines. We focused on the rookie storylines on Friday. So let's focus more on ones pertaining to the vets heading into training camp here this week in Carolina. The number one storyline, it's pretty clear. Dave Canales taking over as Carolina Panthers head coach. It's his first ever training camp as a head coach in the NFL, but of course, first as the head coach here in Carolina. We've seen Canales for a while now. It doesn't really feel like he's that new, considering we saw him go through free agency, through the draft, conduct OTAs, mandatory mini camp, and now the real work begins as he tries to place the foundation, build the foundation of who this Panthers team is going to be under him this season and beyond. And certainly a lot of that went into the mandatory mini camp, all the offseason work that they did during OTAs. But right now, this is when you actually have competition. This is where things are going to be a lot more intense than what we saw when everything was voluntary. In those couple of days where guys actually had to be there and you still didn't get that much work done. Now is really where it all gets going. And I'm excited to see Dave Canales and how he conducts himself. And so far, I've been impressed by him. I'm planning on going out there a couple of times during training camp, since it's here in Charlotte, to go see how he does go about his practices and see the energy. And he talks about the energy all the time that he wants to have at practice. So very curious to see how that goes. But Dave Canales, we'll find out now, because I've had people ask me on a mailbag, how do you feel about Dave Canales? I don't really feel any type of way. Need to wait till Sundays happen in the fall and see whether he wins or loses games. That's what I'm concerned about. I'm not really concerned about how he goes about his press conferences, and really not necessarily that concerned about how he goes about his practice, even though that is far more important than what he says out there to the media and what you guys hear as fans. What matters is what happens on Sundays, and getting the team prepared for Sundays is what they're going to be doing over the next couple of weeks here in Charlotte. And of course, with the preseason also getting underway soon. Number two, Bryce Young's development. That is a key storyline. Like 2023, I look at this season in 2024 as being about Bryce Young's development. Wins, losses are important. This is a team game. I understand that, but this team is not going anywhere until they can find a head coach, but also really a quarterback who can lead them to consistency, to being above mediocrity is what they've been, not even at the last couple of years, as Matt Rule's been the head coach. Frank Reich has been the head coach. They've had Sam Darnold. They've had Baker Mayfield. They've had PJ Walker. They have had Teddy Bridgewater. Mediocrity. They have to find the guy at that spot. And they've chased after it foolishly, especially when you look at the guys they brought in. Again, Darnold, Bridgewater, Mayfield. Didn't really work out. The hope is that Bryce Young will be that guy. Now, Frank Reich and his staff failed spectacular last season in getting Bryce Young to play up to his expectations and really just play baseline starting quarterback football in the NFL last year. That's why he's gone. Dave Canales, as we know, did a great job with Geno Smith 2 years ago, did a great job with Baker Mayfield, who was in Carolina the year prior and looked clearly to me, and I think to a lot of you as well, as not the answer here long-term. Maybe the answer long-term in Tampa Bay after what Canales was able to do with him last year. And there's questions that the Bucs have to ask themselves now that Canales is here in Carolina and not down there in Tampa as to whether Baker can succeed without him. But Geno still played well last year in Seattle without Dave Canales. We'll see if that's going to be the case with Baker. The hope is Dave Canales can get Bryce to play at a high level like Geno did and like Baker did the last couple of years. So, yes, I want to see the team have success. I think the games obviously matter as far as whether they win or lose. But what matters really long-term for this team, this organization, this franchise, all the same thing, is to find the quarterback and really for the guy they gave up all those picks for, and even McCaffrey and DJ Moore, if you think about it, they need this guy to work out and to be that answer. Number 3, the new offensive additions. And this goes hand in hand with Bryce Young's development and giving him a chance to have success, but really giving the organization a chance to evaluate Bryce. I don't know how you evaluate him last season when you had all the offensive line injuries and when DJ Chark can't get open, when Jonathan Mingo can't get open. The only option in the receiving game consistently was Adam Thielen. And when the run game wasn't operating at a high level for the majority of the season, I don't know how you can sit here and blame the quarterback or even look at the quarterback and know whether he's the right guy or not. Everything was beyond effed up last season. FUBAR. That's what it was last year for Bryce Young. Now they add position. They dress every single position on offense this offseason. Offensive line, they brought in Robert Hunt and Damian Lewis to start at right guard and left guard, respectively. Austin Corbett moving into center. Wide receiver, they traded for Deontay Johnson. They brought in Xavier Legette, who they traded up for in the first round out of South Carolina. Running back, they got Jonathon Brooks there in the second round. Jatavion Sanders in the fourth round to come in and be the tight end. So offensive line, wide receiver, running back, tight end, all of those groups were addressed offensively. The only position they didn't address on the offense was that quarterback, where Bryce Young is coming back, Andy Dalton's back once again, and then they add a third quarterback also in Jack Plummer, but not really an addition that I think really matters all that much for the Carolina Panthers heading into this season. So they need to give Bryce a chance. He's got to be upright. He's got to have guys who can get open. He can throw the ball to. Then they can do something with it. And he needs to have a running game that can support him early on in his career. Now, as you go along, you would hope that Bryce can elevate the guys around him. But as a young player, he needs to have a chance. And he did not have a chance last season in Carolina. And these additions should give him a chance. And Dan Morgan, David Tepper, Dave Canales, and the rest of the organization, front office, and coaching staff an opportunity to know whether they have the right guy under center. And number 4, the defensive makeover. Gone are the pieces the Panthers thought they're going to build around. With Brian Burns in New York, Frankie Louvu in Washington, Dante Jackson in Pittsburgh, and Jeremy Chin also in Washington, and also a couple of other guys. Those are 4 guys you really felt a couple of years ago. These are going to be foundational pieces. The only remaining foundational pieces are Derek Brown, who got paid big money this offseason, J.C. Horn, who they invested in with the 5th-year option being picked up for next year, and then Shaq Thompson, who could be in his final season. He's back once again for his 10th season here in Carolina and in the NFL at linebacker. Those are the only guys. The others are out in Carolina. So you look at now who's come in. Jadeveon Clowney makes a homecoming here to Carolina, plus several players who are familiar with Ejiro Evero, who's their DC in past, or maybe work with them as a special teams coach. Josie Jewell worked under Ejiro Evero in Denver a couple seasons ago. Ashawn Robinson in Los Angeles, Jordan Fuller in Los Angeles, and a couple of others like Nick Scott as well in LA. They brought in some other players to other spots like Dane Jackson, a complete and total makeover of a unit that really struggled with injuries. Burns only missed one game last year. Lugu played in all the games. Jackson played in all but one game. Chin missed a lot of time. You saw Deshaun Williams play in a lot of games, but also missed some time. You saw both your starting safeties, and Xavier Woods is back, and Von Bell missed time last season. A litany of injuries. So hopefully they can stay healthy, but also, what is this unit going to look like? And overall, is the talent anywhere close to what the talent was last year when all these players are healthy? And I understand that all these players were not healthy, but the overall defensive makeover, Ejiro Evero in year 2, a guy that we believe will be once again after this season in the NFL coaching cycle as a guy who could get a head coaching job. Will be tough because he's a defensive coordinator, of course, but he's somebody that's highly regarded around the league. And had he been allowed to leave, Carolina could have been the Packers DC or could have been the Rams DC. He's here for another year, and he's got a ton of new players, some guys he's familiar with. So looking at how that defense performs this season with new faces, new names, and also hopefully a better health. Bill of health here in Carolina. So we'll see how all that plays out, as those are 4 big storylines I'm looking at heading into camp. Position battles. We always wonder who's going to be run back 1, who's going to be tight end 1, who's going to be the backups, who's going to be right there fighting for a roster spot. There are 6 different positions I'm looking at heading to training camp that I want to highlight here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. In fact, 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Camp battles, they're about to get cranked up here shortly. Now, a couple days from now, the players are still going to have to be wearing just shorts and T-shirts. Not going to be in pads. Once the pads come on and once Canales has gone through installs once again, that's when we really get to see who's going to be in those top spots and how the Panthers depth chart is going to fill out here. The unofficial depth chart will, of course, happen at some point in August. Don't make too much of it. We'll, of course, talk about it here on the show. All that is, of course, subject to change as they have to go from 90, which they're going to be entering training camp with, down to 53 by 4 p.m. on August 27th later on next month. So over a month from now, we will know the 53 and we'll know the depth chart heading into that week 1 matchup on the road against New Orleans Saints. But 6 positions I'm looking at as far as position battles and how things are going to figure themselves out in those position groups. Chuba Hubbard has earned a top spot at running back, so no concern about whether he'll be RB1. There is going to be questions, though, about Jonathon Brooks as he is going to start off training camp on the shelf. The guys behind him, though, all battling for right now that RB2 spot, and also that RB3 spot once we do get down closer to roster cutdowns. Miles Sanders will be looking to bounce back after a tough first year in Carolina. A lot of fans wondered where the Panthers let him go this offseason. Didn't make a lot of sense as far as salary cap went. So he got that $2 million roster bonus and stayed on the roster past June 1. He's still here. And I would expect if he's here right now, on July 23rd, I expect he'll probably be here once August 27th rolls around, as still there's not much financially that the Panthers can do to open up space by getting rid of Miles Sanders. But he's going to have to play special teams if he's going to be on the roster. He's also going to have to step up and be more of a factor in the run game for the Panthers if he wants to be here, because you can't just be the third running back, fourth running back, and not be able to produce in other areas of the games, in particular on special teams. Raheem Blackshear is going to be somebody who's going to be trying to earn a spot once again on the roster, maybe more as not just a special teamer, as he's likely going to be one of the candidates to be a kick returner, but can he be a part of the game with the team in a run game? Like, can he also be a guy who can help them out on third down, as who knows when Brooks is going to be ready? He's more of a versatile pass catcher than Sanders and Hubbard have proven to be so far in their career, especially their time here in Carolina. Rashad Penny, that was an intriguing pickup by the Panthers as he spent time with this coaching staff in Seattle, hasn't been able to stay healthy, didn't play much of a role at all in Philadelphia last year. Now he comes into Carolina, where, again, this coaching staff knows him. There is a little bit of an opportunity with Brooks on the sideline for now. Can he stay healthy, and can he earn a spot? Can he beat out Sanders? Can he beat out Blackshear, as he has played at times special teams? We will see. So running back, in particular, spots below Hubbard, and while Brooks are out, that is something I'm looking to see. Well, Hubbard's not out, but while Brooks is out, those are some of the spots I'm looking to see how that works out. Tight end, Tavion Sanders, he was taken 101 overall right there in the fourth round to begin that third day of the NFL draft. The Panthers desperately needed to address the tight end position. They waited that long to do it, and now they have somebody who can be a pass-catching tight end. There's questions of whether he can be a good enough blocker. Do you line him up more out wide as he starts out? Do you have him actually in that three-point stance and playing tight end and blocking? We'll see. And I think that you can obviously get that out of him over time. But right now, I would think you want to get him on the field to be able to find some playmakers. Can he come in and immediately push Tommy Trimble for that spot as the top tight end here in Carolina? Or will Trimble, with his experience, his coaching from this coaching staff, will he be able to hold on to that spot? So that's a spot to look at heading into camp. Wide receiver, Adam Thielen, Deontay Johnson are clearly going to be the top two here in Carolina as the season starts. Who's going to be the third? Does Xavier Legette immediately come in and claim that wide receiver 3 spot like we saw last year, where Jonathan Mingo, he claimed that spot right away as Frank Reich and his coaching staff drafted him? Or is it going to be Mingo, who in his second year, a full offseason in new scheme, maybe he looks better, maybe he's ready to go? Terrace Marshall Jr., former second-round pick, like Mingo, is it going to finally be his time? He's a name that Dave Canales brought up during OTAs as someone who's interested to see how he performs once training camp begins. Does Terrace Marshall live up to the hype that we really haven't ever been able to see, as he wasn't healthy his rookie year, then his second year got the opportunity last year, was literally forgotten about. Now, fourth year, third coaching staff, really 4. If you think about, he had Rule, then he had Wilkes, who had a different philosophy than last year of Reich. Pretty much his fourth coaching staff. How is he going to factor in? And there's going to be a battle at the end of that depth chart to be the 5th or 6th wide receiver. And Terrace Marshall Jr., Jonathan Mingo, there's going to be guys who potentially could be right there in it. So I'm interested to see if there will really be an open competition for wide receiver 3, or if it's just going to be Xavier Legette. Looking at the offensive line, we know who the starters are going to be. But at the end of that depth chart, guys like Cade Mays and Chandler Zavala played a lot of football last year. Ricky Lee made the team out of camp. I'm guessing that they're going to be battling for the final few roster spots, and depth is obviously going to be important, as the Panthers had a ton of injuries last year. The hope is that the starting 5 will be able to play every snap in all 17 games this season, but that's just not realistic, as there will be probably a guy who misses a game or 2. We'll see how it works out. But you have guys like Brady Christensen who can provide depth. You brought in Josh Nijman, who's going to be starting off training camp on the physically unable to perform list, or also the PUP list. How does that potentially impact Ricky Lee? Does that help him, as he's going to get more of those second team snaps at tackle? Does that help him get onto the roster, or is there really no impact at all, as we don't really know right now, as I have not heard Dave Canales speak as of this recording, what the issue is with Josh Nijman. So Cade Mays, Chandler Zavala, Ricky Lee, just right there at the bottom of the depth chart, wondering who's going to be able to win those final few roster spots as they try to figure that out. And looking at it overall, there's not a lot of true competitions, I feel like, going into camp. And that's the thing. Training camp, you look at it, all right, Camp Owls, let's get excited about them. We know pretty much 47 of the 53 guys are going to be on the roster. We know, based off of contracts for agency, what roles these guys are being brought into play. Just looking at some of the things down the depth chart that may be interesting to look at, as really, I looked at the top of it. I don't see really any true kind of battles for starting spots here in Carolina this season, which is a departure from what we've seen the last couple of years. 2 more position groups we're looking at. Defensive line. This may be one where you could see the starter getting pushed. I do think that obviously Derek Brown's going to be a starter, but I think that Ashawn Robinson is coming in to be a starter. He'll also rotate depending on down and distance. He'll be more of a run stopper, and then they'll bring somebody else who they feel like is better getting after the passer on some of those later downs. But Shai Tuttle didn't play well last year. Only reason I think he's still here in Carolina is based off of the contract structure that Samir Suleiman, who was no longer here, and Scott Fitter, of course, who's no longer here, gave him last year. Jaden Crumedy, they just drafted in the 6th round out of Mississippi State. Nick Thurman showed some signs last year of being a player that can really help this team moving forward. LeBron Ray as well. Can any of those three push Shai Tuttle for that starting spot? Dan Morgan was here, but he wasn't the general manager who gave him the contract. Brent Tillis wasn't here to give him the contract. And this is, of course, a same coaching staff, but the head coach, he's going to have to say in some of this, I would imagine, does Shai Tuttle end up starting again at defensive tackle, or can Crumedy, Thurman, or Ray push him for that starting spot? Then the final position group I'm looking at, and this actually could be one of the true position battles, even though I don't think it should be, at kicker Eddie Pinheiro versus Harrison Mevis, the undrafted free agent out of Missouri. The Panthers really should just give Pinheiro what he wants. He's been the 3rd most accurate kicker since the end of the league, 3rd most accurate kicker in the history of the National Football League, which has had over 100 seasons. Just give him what he wants. Mevis was fine at Mizzou. Going to have to be way more accurate in the NFL, and it's going to be tough to be more accurate than what Pinheiro has been, because historically we've seen there have been plenty of guys who have come and gone who have not been as accurate as Eddie Pinheiro, and the calculus has changed, as we've seen with extra points. And Mevis made all but one at Mizzou. That was 20-yard extra point there in college, 35 here in the NFL. Completely different ball game there. I think they should get the contract situation worked out. Pinheiro, maybe look at Mevis, who has a bigger leg than Pinheiro, somebody that they like as a younger player who they could grow with moving forward, as this is a team that is not necessarily seen in a position like they were a couple years ago, where they had Graham Gano, who was great, and Harrison Buckers turned out to be great, where they wanted to go with the veteran because they thought this was a playoff team. Now, this year, not a playoff team. Maybe they could take more of a risk with the kicker position. But then again, you could be in a situation like they've been in the last couple of years, where you're trying to find a kicker and you're dealing with injuries and you're not quite sure where you have your guy. I think they have their guy, and they should pay their guy, and that guy is Eddie Pinheiro. So there's a couple of position groups and battles to look at heading into training camp. Not really any true battles for starting spots, in my opinion, outside of maybe kicker and possibly defensive tackle heading into training camp. Now, injuries. Always wondering what that's going to look like heading into camp. Panthers made a couple of roster moves on Friday when the rookies reported. We'll talk about those roster moves and the impact heading to training camp here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. With the playoffs over and the NFL season not quite here, we do have the Olympics starting this week. The fewer the games and the sports really aren't sportsing like I want them to, even though they're about to start sportsing like I want them to. But let this be known, FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Heading into camp, I was wondering who would be available for the Panthers once things started out, and what kind of impact that would have on the roster over the next couple weeks, and especially heading into the 2024 season. We found out on Friday, as the rookies reported to camp, the Panthers made a couple of roster moves of some names that we have discussed whether they would be ready to go. Jonathon Brooks was placed on the active/non-football injury list. Brooks can be activated from the list at any time, but has not been cleared at this point in time to start camp from that torn ACL suffered last November when playing at the University of Texas. Since Brooks' injury happened before he started his NFL career, that's why he's placed on the NFI list, the non-football injury list, as opposed to being placed on the physically unable to perform list, or PUP. So there is that. And looking at this, there's no need to rush Brooks if you're Carolina, as he's somebody that they obviously value and think can be a player for them beyond the next 4 seasons. It looks like this is somebody that they're going to want to keep around as long as it's the same coaching staff and same general manager. They value running backs, and they showed that when they traded up to get Brooks earlier in the 2nd round. But I do wonder, and I think it's fair to ask, why the Panthers were so eager to trade back up early into the 2nd round to draft a running back who they expected to play a significant role for them this year and the years to come. Maybe not even this year, but they expect him to play a significant role down the line. Why they would get him now when he's coming off of an injury like an ACL that could prevent him from having a significant role this season. Like, why not wait until 2025, take one of the backs coming out of the draft, coming out of college next season, and then get all 4 years of him healthy? Why get a guy now who, yes, was the top running back, but was banged up and may not be the same guy this season, even when he is healthy, as he'll be in the next coming years? Why not get all 4 years of him healthy? I think that's a fair question to ask. Why they're so eager to get a running back, and it was something that puzzled me as far as why they were targeting a running back in the second round. I understood the versatility aspect of it. Ian Rappaport told us on that broadcast expectation was he'd be clear by July 1. It's July 23. That was 22 days ago. He is not clear. Not necessarily a big deal right now, but I do wonder what kind of role Brooks will be able to play, and if the Panthers were a little bit too excited to get a running back that early when they could have possibly waited a year later and got a player with the same talent who actually would have been healthy for them right away. We'll never know. And they also place 4 other players on the active/physically unable to perform list, PUP list: DJ Wonnum, Yosh Nijman, Amari Barno, and Jalen Coker, the UDFA out of Holy Cross. Starting off with Wonnum, this isn't a surprise. I've been telling y'all for well over a month, probably months now, that Wonnum has had some issues with that partially torn quad that he suffered last year in Minnesota that cost him the rest of that season there with the Vikings. And that was something that was going to keep him out of OTAs. And the Panthers told us that, pretty early on. But when I had a conversation with somebody, they were telling me that he may not be ready to go for training camp. They wouldn't flat out say he started off on PUP. I was feeling like he's probably going to start off on PUP, and he, as we see, is starting off on the PUP list. And that's not good news for Carolina, as we have talked about with the edge rusher group. I'm not really enamored with this group at all. I think they can get a good season out of Clowney. They could also get a terrible season out of Clowney, which you never know based off of his recent track record. But if he's healthy, he should play at a high level. But also, if he's healthy and Wonnum's not healthy, and DJ Johnson, who gave the Panthers absolutely nothing last year, is your other outside linebacker, are you concerned at all, if you're an offense coordinator and an offense coaching staff, about DJ Johnson? Are you concerned about Caleb Chason, who's been a bust up until this point in time? Are you concerned about Cam Gill? Are you concerned about any of these other guys more than you're concerned about Jadeveon Clowney, who still is a name, even if he hasn't always produced at the level that was expected out of him once he was drafted first overall out of South Carolina? I'm more concerned about him than anyone else here. So if Wonnum is not going to be able to play, the concern's still going to be on Clowney. But Wonnum has shown that he has the ability to get after the passer and to get home. And if he's not healthy and you're focusing or relying on DJ Johnson and some of these other unnamed guys, that is going to be tough for Carolina, a team that was already struggling with pass rush last year, even when they had Burns and Luvu there to help supplement as a linebacker, and Yetur Gross-Matos playing well. They lost the majority of their sacks last season. They're bringing in some new guys, but there's already questions about one of the guys just be a starter here, and that certainly concerns me for a position group I look at as one of the weakest on the roster, just presently standing heading into training camp. Amari Barno, I'd expect him to stay on the PUP list as the season begins, much like we saw with Austin Corbett last year. Different player, understand, but same injury, and the recovery is going to be different for everybody. But still, it feels like this is going to be a guy who, if they keep him on the roster, they don't do an injury settlement, and really not much reason to do that, considering he's still in his rookie deal. It's not like he's making that much money as a former 4th or 5th round pick out of Virginia Tech. Barno would start off on PUP, and then they'll bring him back whenever he's ready to go. When will that be? To be determined. Yosh Nijman, don't know what the injury is there. That is not ideal. Mentioned earlier, Ricky Lee made the roster out of camp last year, didn't play any actual snaps on offense a year ago, but he's somebody that the Panthers are going to continue to develop and could step in there. But Yosh Nijman, you brought him in to be your swing tackle. You brought him in to be an experienced player for you. You also have Brady Christensen who can play that role. So you're not in a worse shape with him being out right now. And we'll find out on Tuesday how big of a deal that is, as Dave Canales should speak to the media. And same thing with Dan Morgan. And then as far as Jalen Coker goes, I said yesterday, and here's the thing, you could probably tell if you listened to the show yesterday, that was recorded prior to the news. I went to Hilton Head this past weekend, wanted to record a show before I left town, as if you drive 4 hours back home on a Sunday and you're stuck in traffic, you're probably not in the best mood to want to record a show. So I'm going to give you the best show I could when I was actually feeling rested. So I recorded this before this news came out, and I had Coker making the roster. And I still think if he comes back and he's healthy, he could do it, as there's an opportunity at wide receiver. This will obviously have an impact on his ability to do that. We saw last year, Chandler Zavala, there was thoughts he was going to come in and compete with Brady Christensen, which is hilarious when you think back at how bad he turned out to be, Zavala was. But maybe he would have been better had he not started out the training camp on PUP. Now, he was only out, I think, for the first week, and he was able to go. So maybe this can only be a thing where just right now, Coker's not ready to go, but then we get into it, get to through the first week and get to next week, and it really head into the preseason game against New England, that he'll be really full go. And that's still 2 weeks away before they even play that game up there against the Patriots. So those are the guys who are starting off practice on the shelf in the quick injury report. A name I did not mention, J.C. Horn. A name I did not mention, Xavier Legette. Those are positive things to head into the year. Those guys, vitally important to the success of this team this year, and they are healthy. The others right now are not, and in due time will be. So there is the injury report here heading to camp in Carolina. That's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe, follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter, at Julian Council, where I will be back with you again on Friday to answer your weekly Friday mailbag questions, either at me or DM me, to get those questions into me now. But in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding. And tomorrow, the Panthers begin training camp practice, and I'll discuss all that Dave Canales, Dan Morgan, and the Panthers players had to say when moving into camp here in Uptown Charlotte on Locked On Panthers.